It's like a psychedelic experience. We can label psychedelic experience as bad, like a bad trip. You hear that a lot. I don't actually believe in bad trips. I believe that if you take that and you sit with it and extract what was present there, you probably gain some golden nuggets of wisdom. So, similar, like life is psychedelic, truthfully. So if we look at life in different perspectives, that's a psychedelic. And we forget that.
Wow. That's a quote right there. Welcome back to Open Late. First of all, my lovers and friends. I have with me Dr. Kat Meyer, who is my neighbor in LA, who I've been stalking for the last year. And she is a licensed marriage and family therapist, but she specializes in sex, trauma, and ketamine therapy. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I literally just picked up my microphone and moved it closer to me. I realized that looked like a dick that was just moving closer to me. It's like this phallic symbol. I'm like, bring it to my mouth.
This is like the constant thing when you have a podcast that's like about sex, that you can't not make the sex joke about your microphone.
Yeah. It's covered too. So I like to think of it as uncircumcised mic.
Yeah, it looks very girthy.
Yeah.
The head is knobby for those of you that are listening and not watching on YouTube.
Yeah, it's pretty delightful. I'm just gonna.
Yours is also like multicolored. It's like white shaft, black head. Cool.
Yeah, it feels appropriate for my soul and my expression in this lifetime. The light and the dark.
I love where this is going. Well, I told you actually before I hit record that I'm doing this thing where I'm trying to be a better podcaster and not start every show off with, tell me how you decided that this is what you wanted to do. I would love to hear, I want to jump right into ketamine therapy and the intersection of working on sex and sexuality, working through your trauma in a therapeutic way. And now you're throwing in this extremely powerful, medicine. What is the reason that most people end up choosing to do ketamine assisted therapy in the first place?
Oh, that's a good question. So any sort of psychedelics, and I'm using the word, I'm using psychedelics as defining that as mind manifesting. Like the word psychedelics is mind manifesting. We're getting into more altered states of consciousness, or really just an expansion of our brain's capacity, like typical capacity to be able to do things. We can imagine those as tools to be able to help us to, whether it's to expand our perspective, to quiet down that inner critic so that we can look beyond this narrow focus of I'm a shitty person or shame that's like inhibiting our ability to come up with a new resolution or new thoughts and ways of being, or even to access some more complex concepts, in this case around sexuality, that might not otherwise be as easily accessible to us in non-altered states of consciousness of being. So ketamine is a legal form of psychedelic or a psychedelic-like. It's really just a psychedelic-like substance that we can use in a therapeutic way in order to help somebody to be able to experience, insights or like a calmness in a body, an absence of pain. Ketamine is a pain reliever as well as an anesthetic. And so at different doses, it can create a different quality, a different, I like to say, texture of the substance, for different benefits. So at lower doses, you can still be connected with your body. It just may feel a little more floaty. You have an absence of pain. So for people who struggle with chronic pain, or who may have pain as it relates to depression or anxiety, that quiets or goes away so that they can more readily focus on the emotions or the thoughts um,
Mhm.
that are behind that. And at higher doses, oh, it also at lower doses it works as an empathogen. So similar to things like MDMA, it helps to increase your vulnerability, allows more truth and more honesty to come flow through more readily,
Yeah.
and then we can connect more with our compassion for ourselves and compassion for the other person. And then at
Yeah.
higher doses, you can have more experiences that are more psychedelic like. So you might have out of body experiences, you may have spiritual experiences, you may meet spiritual archetypes, you might experience oneness or the absolution of division between
Mm.
you and other objects or you and other people. You might have these more expansive understanding of the universe or the world or how things operate within it. um, yeah, you might have colors and spheres and textures. You might go on a journey. So yeah, so there's a range there, and then even within that, there's a spectrum. So I have some clients who, we give them a dose, and they are expecting to shoot off into the stratosphere, but the experience is actually them staying very present in the room and can hear the things that are going on around them and just like a deep meditation. And
Yeah.
so I really want to emphasize this full spectrum of possibility of experiences, because we
Mhm.
hear from other people of what it could be like, and we're like, oh, that's the experience I'm gonna have. And then we get into it, and they're like, what the fuck? I'm still here. I didn't shoot off on a rainbow farting or rainbow farting unicorns farting rainbows. Like, why didn't I have that?
Yeah, they're like, "It didn't work for me. All that happened was, like, I was in my leg, and I felt like all this, stuff moving out of my leg, or, like, the whole time I was just, like, grieving my mother's death, and I
Yeah,
didn't have any psychedelic experience." And
yeah.
I'm like,
Uh,
"That's exactly what you needed."
that's what it
Um,
was. Yeah, yeah.
well, I appreciate you sharing just like the full spectrum because it was getting me super excited. I love working with, all types of medicine, therapeutic medicine, plant medicine. And so just when I get reminded that there are infinite possibilities with a lot of these different things that we have access to now, I just get like, okay, when am I going to have my next journey? But cool, because I guess what you're sharing too is people come to it for all different types of reasons,
Sure.
or do you find that there's a trend that people are drawn to work
Yeah.
with specifically?
Yeah, so ketamine is really known well for its antidepressant, anxiety relieving qualities, and even more so than traditional antidepressants that can cause a reduction of our libido or difficulty with arousal or maintaining erections or even wetness of our pussy. Ketamine works on the glutamate receptors, so it doesn't work on the same receptors that say traditional antidepressants would. So you're skirting around those common side effects. But then we also see that with consistent use of it or consistent sessions with it, it can contribute to lasting change, around depression, around especially for people in which other types of therapy or other types of depression techniques or practices haven't been effective. This one has a tendency to really stick. So we see that
Yeah.
with, again, depression, anxiety. We see it with really powerful with eating disorders, obsessive compulsive disorder, suicidality. So some of those really tough ones. Also, trauma. It can work really well with trauma, and it can work with addiction, but with a caveat there too, because ketamine is also highly addictive. So we are finding
Mm.
an increase of addiction happening, and ketamine's pretty, accessible in the outside world. However, I caution everybody with that. please, harm reduction, if you're getting it elsewhere, test it, because if it's not coming from a clinical doctor, then we don't know what else could be laced in there. And we're having an epidemic of fentanyl being laced with it. And so a lot of death, a lot of harm that's happening. So please be careful. But with that said,
Oh,
yeah, there's many reasons. And then I also bring it in as an avenue to be able to help people in relationships or help around challenges around sexuality. Ketamine, again, because it's an empathogen. It opens the heart. It helps us to be able to communicate more fluidly. And when I say this, I'm talking more about like the low doses. When you're at the high dose, it's more of like, I'm not in my body to be able to talk to you. So that doesn't really help conversation. But here it can be enough to lower down that wall so that we can talk. I also
yeah.
find it can be really helpful with connecting with the body in a way that, again, because it's a slight dissociator, at lower dose, you can still feel the body and you can still connect with energy moving through the body, or connect with pleasurable feelings in the body, especially
Mm,
for people who have a difficult time with, connecting with the body. They don't want to be in the body. They,
yeah.
tense up a lot, or there's a lot of pain. This can help to experience the body in a different way.
Yeah. Beautiful. I, I love that you shared that it works like on a different receptor than a lot of other medicines, right? Am I saying it right? It's a different um, receptor in your brain than like a traditional pharmaceutical antidepressant, and then also other psychedelics.
So yes, and it's so interesting how mysterious the brain is still. And we are still learning so much more about the brain, and be getting more precise about parts of the brain, like the default mode network process, which is something that you hear a lot in conversations and interviews about psychedelics. We're learning even more about, how much or how little that part of the brain is even being impacted. But yes, so the uh, uh, primary receptor is the glutamate in the ketamine, which is different than some of these other psychedelics or traditional antidepressants. And so while we experience some similarities across the board, we're going to experience a lot of differences because of those two.
Okay, interesting. 'Cause I was told, I think maybe the first time that I wanted to work with ketamine in this way, that it's like no one's allergic to it. And like it's actually what people were using, or what doctors use in like an ER trauma, because it's like the safest
Hmm.
medicine. Is that true? In that way, like safer than
Yeah.
morphine or these other like massive painkillers that have like terrible effects, after effects on the body as well. And ketamine became like a standout drug in that place because it was safer than everything else. And that was actually what made me feel comfortable to do it the first time. So I'm like,
Yeah.
ketamine, what? And then I heard that and I was like, okay, cool. They're using it in the ER. It's good enough for me.
Yeah,
And
it
then I learned,
has.
yeah,
Yeah, it
go ahead.
does have one of the highest safety profiles. So they've used it in on the battlefield in wars. They've used it in pediatrics as an anesthetic. They it. I don't know about the allergen. I don't know if I haven't heard that, but it does work really well with people's systems. There may be a few things that would be contraindications, and those are things like high heart conditions or psychosis, things like that. But even then, I'm reading some research that are testing some of those more vulnerable populations as well. So hang tight. There may be more research coming out. This is all still very
Wow.
new, but you're absolutely
Right.
right. And the after
Yeah.
effect is very soft. So as you're coming down from it, it's a soft landing. And for the next about 48 to 72 hours, your neuroplasticity is a lot more pliable. So this is a great time for therapy. This is a great time for introspection and for trying new habits to strengthen new neural pathways, new cognitions, and
Mm.
and you'll also feel, typically, now this isn't everybody, but typically you'll feel brighter, you'll feel happier, you'll just feel more open and expansive and relaxed in the body. And again, that isn't everybody. I've worked with clients who had tearful experiences, but even then, it there was a relief a few days later because it was a resolution. So,
Yeah. Something that needed to pass or to move or to shift. Um, yeah, man, I just love working with these, mind altering substances for therapy. I mean, I talk about this on the show sometimes. I don't go into detail, but I'm no stranger to, trying psychedelics, and it was seeing it used so much maybe in an environment where it was like a more casual party situation, where I noticed the effects, the therapeutic effects happening there in a very not clear container. And it's what got me really interested in wanting to work with a lot of these things in an actual, like, traditional, sometimes clinical container, sometimes more spiritual container. And I just think that, as you're saying, we're so new to all this, and there's still so much to learn and so much research to develop. But I think it's really cool that, you know, people like you are doing this work. And I kind of want to start to ask about, what does it look like when someone comes and does a session with you? And since you're also doing, like, you know, using this with sexuality, are you working with like couples together in session? Like, or is it solo and then they'll take that home to their partner? Are they doing it together?
both. I've done both. Yeah. So
Okay.
sometimes, yeah, I'll have the couple coming in together, and again, ketamine's such an interesting one. It's got a different texture than the other the other psychedelics, and the window is shorter, which is nice
Mm,
because then we can go in, do focus on one piece at a time, let them integrate that, and then come back, focus on another piece, let them integrate. And you're not in there for 4 or 6 or 8 hours like some other, MDMA or psilocybin, which are both only in clinical trials. So I want to emphasize it's not legal yet. It's just around the corner. They have awesome benefits to them as well, and so does ketamine. So yeah, so we'll go in there. I'll usually start with something to help them ground and connect with themselves, and then co-regulate with the other person. And then we open the space to see what happens. Of course, the intention, I work with them on setting what the intention is, and that helps to guide the session, although the session can take it in other places too. So it's can be a helpful way to, yeah, drop into some of the lessons or some of the challenges that they've been experiencing in the traditional talk therapy or somatic therapy that I'm doing with them, and then ground it
mhm.
into there, and see what insights come from that, what dots get connected, or what would they feel in their body, or what they witness in their own inner landscape. Um, and then the next day, I have a follow up session with them, and then we process and integrate and see what abstract thoughts came through that we can now apply into the real life. How can we take these concepts, these aha moments, and put them into practical reality? Like, what are steps? What are rituals? What are um, you know, practices we can do here? Because otherwise, if we
Mm,
don't integrate, then it just becomes like a trip, and it doesn't actually, it might do something. I don't want to say it doesn't do anything, but we can harness so much more, we can harvest so much more.
absolutely. I mean, it's like anything in life, any transformational experience, whether it's like a weekend retreat or course or medicine work,
Sure.
integration, I think, is the most important part. And it's like, in I find that when you actually are really intentional and spend time and are methodical almost about your integration, or at least put a nice container for it, right? Bring a little bit of masculine energy to it. That's what I need. And then I
Mhm.
can be creative and flow into my integration. That's where even more profound, sometimes ahas or breakthroughs or experiences come in my therapy session 3 weeks later, where
Yeah.
I'm like, bigger emotional release or breakthrough or somatic experience than in the actual session,
Mhm.
which I love. So I just wanted to emphasize that point. I'm actually building a psychedelic integration course, and maybe by
Beautiful.
the time this episode comes out, it'll be released. We'll see. I don't know. um, yeah. Can you share some of your like integration sort of tools? I mean, you just kind of went over, I think, like the session, but what are people doing for weeks later?
I mean, it really just depends on what comes through for them. So I use them as the healer and them coming
Mm,
up with these ideas of ways that they it can be anything from so we extract what came up in the session, right? And we talk about whether they were images, whether they were memories, thoughts, feelings, body, somatic responses. And then I give them reflection questions and have them sit with the answer. So, what's the answer coming from within them? I find that that's the most beneficial way of helping somebody is having them recognize that they have the inner wisdom and the inner resources, and it's all there with them. I just may have to ask the right questions to inspire that in them. And then from that, we talk about okay, so if we're going to turn this abstract thought into something that's concrete, which is a very Jungian type of practice, then what are some practices? What are some symbols? What are some rituals you would like to do? What are something that would translate what you learned into this? So that can be everything from
mm,
like I've had burning rituals to yoga. Now they're going to get into yoga, meditation practice, art, creativity. Maybe it's embodying these new qualities of self that they've discovered, or self pleasure practices, or going on a retreat, or going on a vacation or something to anchor this in. Uh, it
yeah.
really helps to solidify because otherwise things just stay in our
Mm,
head, but they don't actually ground into this day, this
mm,
life.
yeah. Yeah. Wow. So much. I'm loving this conversation and I have a million questions. I'm like, I know if I ask the next a whole trajectory of like where we'll take it. Um, I'm curious, what's like the biggest misconception that people have about this kind of work?
About psychedelics?
Yeah.
Oh, I think, I mean, some of the misconceptions, I don't know that they're all unfounded. I think right now we're going through this renaissance of like higher states of consciousness and thinking and expansion and fullest expression. And it's beautiful. We're watching documentaries on how to change your mind, or we're listening to documentaries around psychedelics or plant medicine, and I think that's really beautiful, and it's exciting. It's like, wow, there's a new answer. And there's also a shadow side to that too that I don't see talked about as much as it needs to be talked about, so that we can have a full picture, so that we can discern for ourselves what's right for us. Like, it's hard when we're only given just the light bright aspects of it, and then we're disappointed when it doesn't work for us, or we're disappointed many of us are looking for a savior, or for like the answer pill, and that's not psychedelics. And psychedelics aren't also for everyone. I also hear this a lot from people. They're like, psychedelics are for everyone. And I'm like, no, they aren't. They are one tool. They aren't the answer. They are a tool that can help us to understand our inner workings and our inner landscape, and even perhaps, and not for everyone, some people connect with spiritual insights, and that's not everyone. And there's also the, what you alluded to too, of the lack of integration, the lack of intention setting, the lack of integrating what you're learning. There can be a use of the psychedelics as, well, there's a hierarchy. There's a I'm noticing like a hierarchy of judgment of people who use psychedelics. Whether you're somebody who doesn't use psychedelics and you're looking at other people using psychedelics and you're like, that's cheating, or that's not natural, or that's, you're just
Yeah.
escaping, or even in the psychedelic community where people are like, well, that drug is chemical based, so that's not
Right.
that's worse
It's like,
than something that's plant based. Yeah, it's not
yeah.
natural, don't do, whatever. There's just so much judgment. And then there's also, I've seen the excitement of psychedelics causing us to skip the very, very important process of vetting our shamans or vetting our facilitators. And so we're seeing a lot of abuse. We're seeing sexual abuse. We're seeing abuse as in taking advantage of vulnerable populations, physically, mentally,
Mhm.
emotionally. And so we're taking, and I think a big part of it is because it's underground. So there's so many facilitators that aren't held to a higher standard. They don't have a certification. They don't have a regulating board who's observing their actions and behaviors, and can, you know, take receive the consequences for their poor actions. So people are excited and
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh, shaman Joseph, I'm going to go and work with him because my friend, did ayahuasca with them, and and then they go in there and something happens. And then but then,
Mhm.
does the person feel that they have a right in being able to say, I don't feel comfortable, or something's not right? I've had
Mhm.
people come to me and tell me these stories about how their shaman, you know, told them things like, I've never met anybody like you. I think we were soulmates from another lifetime. I really feel strongly connected to you. Yeah, which is so unfortunate. And then, the person's like, yes, I love this attention. This is somebody who's of power, and they're looking at me. I'm being chosen. I'm being special. And that is, that's terrible boundaries.
Yeah. It's
Somebody who's a teacher like that, yeah, it's awful. Somebody who's a teacher in a role like that, it may not be aware of the power differential. So is in
mm,
that sense, is consent actually uh accessible? Like, is consent actually present? It's not, because there is this
yeah.
power differential. Yeah. And similarly,
Mhm.
who goes to psychedelics? People who might have some challenges in their past, unresolved trauma, um, you know, vulnerable situations. And people who have vulnerabilities like that have a vulnerability of entering into, or having poor boundaries and entering back into these dynamics again and again. So it's just, these are the conversations we need to have so that people can have the discernment to vet for themselves, or go through the vetting
Yeah.
process so that they can discern for themselves whether this is a right fit or not, rather than just taking somebody's
Yeah.
word.
I'm so glad that, you brought this up and that we are talking about this. I mean, I think this is probably the first show that's ever, on this podcast that's actually about this, and it's not just casually mentioned.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the biggest, most important factors in deciding to do this work is really finding the right person for you. Like take all of your time
Mhm.
and do all of the research and seek out, clients who have worked with, these practitioners, facilitators, therapists, like whoever it might be. Like same way when I went to find my therapist, luckily for us, like the first time we were looking for a marriage, going to therapy, couples therapy, we like jackpot first person
Oh,
and
bless.
we've been with her ever. It's like crazy, right? That never
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
And then when I was looking for myself, I actually still haven't found somebody to work with.
Yeah.
And I've tried multiple people and I'm not going to stay if it's not like the right
Good.
fit. And maybe it's because I'm unique and intense and weird, but it's hard to find
Mhm.
sex positive,
Yeah.
polyamory, like positive, open therapists, and you're one of them, I
Yeah.
know. And I have several other friends whose books are so full because there's so few of you
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
doing like this beautiful cutting edge work. And so, my small tangent just to remind everybody, like take your time and do your research. And this is your health, your mental,
Yeah.
emotional health, just as important as your
Yeah.
physical health. Like this, you would vet a sexual partner and you want to like see their test. Like it's okay to be like, seek out previous clients that have gone to their ceremony or something, not that it would be a client, however you say it. It's always so the blurry line of like ceremony space and clinical space, but you know what
Yeah.
I mean, patience.
I actually put
Yeah.
that I created a guide on my website that goes through all these different questions for vetting your facilitator, whether this is a facilitator for sex or psychedelics or plant medicine,
Well,
because this is
okay.
important. I see this a lot in the sex world as well. And I've been asked in interviews before where people say, how does somebody decide? I got asked this, and it was in a third wave interview, which is psychedelics, but they asked about sex coaches, and they're like, how do you decide who is a good sex coach? And I was like, yeah, because right now we're going through a sexual revolution. Everybody and their mom wants to be a sex coach. Like everybody. And it used to be, where if you wanted to be a sex expert or dominatrix or a courtesan, you went through years of training and you were an
Mhm.
apprentice for a while, and you really went through and cultivated these skills. And now everybody's taking a course online, or they really love sex and they're like, I'm a sex coach, and I'm
Yeah.
excited for this revolution. I really am. And that also just means that we need to look beyond the pretty aesthetics of their social media to really see if they're going to be a right fit, or if they're somebody who can hold us, who can really hold us in our experience. Lots of sex coaches are not trauma informed, or they're aware of trauma, they're informed that trauma exists, but they don't know how to
Yeah.
hold it or how to help you to somatically move through it. So this guide, I bring it through several questions for you to both sit with yourself as well as interview the facilitator, whether, again, plant medicine, shamanistic ceremony, or sex educator.
Wow, beautiful. We're going to link it in the show notes for sure for everybody listening. I can't wait to take it. Did not realize you had that. So I'm like excited about it. Yeah. Okay, listening to you talk about all this, you're clearly so passionate and so knowledgeable. And, I mean, you're an LMFT. Like clearly you have, this traditional education in therapy, and I'm sure you've done a ton of, other training to like it's not easy to do what
Tons.
she does. So there are sex coaches and then there are like licensed, doctors who are doing this work. Not to say, like, as you said, it's exciting. There's so many people doing it. And it's a good signal. It means like the tide is turning in the direction that we're
Yeah.
like really wanting. I'm curious for you, like, what was it? Was there like a moment where you were like, yeah, that's what I want to be doing? I'm sure it's a
Yeah.
gradual thing, right?
No,
It
this is like
develops
a
into
moment.
the moment.
This was a moment. I can tell you exactly. It's actually a great story. So I was 21. I was in college, studying to be an
Really?
animal psychologist. Yeah. And so I was taking psychology courses, animal behavior, all that kind of stuff. And I was reading a Red Book magazine, and they were quoting a sex therapist. And in that moment, I was like, there is such a thing as being a sex therapist. And I was like, that's what I want to be. And the kicker is, I had never had sex before. I had actually been I had a sexual violation that happened when I was younger that caused me to go
Mm,
into like anxiety, depression, panic, eating disorders, like a whole thing for years. I couldn't
mm.
Relationships would last like 2 weeks and I would panic and just get the fuck out over and over and over. I was the best tease and like, but when it came down to like anybody starting to touch my, like go towards my pants or anything like that, I would just be like, shoot, done. I dissociated. I had no idea what dissociation was. But anyway, besides the point, I was like, read that and I was like, that's what I'm going to be. So I applied to all doctoral schools and moved out to California and like dove into the sex communities and like started with tantra and then like progressed from there. But it was, yeah, that was it. I wanted to heal.
Wow.
I wanted to figure out myself, and so I could reverse engineer that to be able to help people. But that was it.
Oh, it's so beautiful. I love it. You're like, yep, I know exactly where I was when I was reading the magazine. That's very cool. I feel like it's really cool when someone has that because you can always look back and say that is exactly where I started,
Mhm.
as opposed to like your career sort of develops and unfolds, and you're like, it's so interesting how I got here. Yeah, that's so cool. So you were going to be an animal therapist.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
I mean,
Yeah.
same,
I mean, that's
same.
always the way. Well,
Humans, animals, same, same.
we can learn a lot from animals, especially the way that none of them are monogamous. like,
And
like,
openly
it was,
gay, like openly gay animals. Like, come on.
yeah, all of them. Um, I don't even remember what I was
Dolphin
gonna say.
orgies. Like,
Yeah, I learned it from the dolphins. Oh, how was your burn? We're both burners. We've never met in real life. We're actually having coffee for everybody listening. Just breaking the talking to you now, listener. We're meeting up for coffee for this, and I like can't wait to squeeze you.
yeah,
But
yeah.
we have a common- we both went to Burning Man this year. I don't know if yours was as traumatic as mine, but I am curious to hear about it.
Yeah, it was both challenging every single day. I had a breakdown. I solo camped by myself as an edge for myself to really like, yeah, step into a little discomfort. And every day was a breakdown, but after every breakdown, some stranger or some friend would show up and be there and support me. So it was a beautiful experience of surrender and softening into vulnerability and letting people help me. And I also had powerful moments of I taught a workshop there at Playa Alchemist, which is a really big camp on the main street, and it was about find your kink, find your power. And it was just, I came in from my bike broke down on my way over there. I had to walk, a mile across the esplanade to in the middle of a whiteout, and I was like, I don't know if I'm walking in the right direction. I hope I, I hope hit the mark.
Oh my
So yeah, so it was wild, but also like really fucking powerful and sexy. One of my intentions was I wanted to have a slutty burn, and I definitely had a slutty burn. And I also had,
yes.
just, yeah, moments of my dad had passed away a couple months before. And so I had beautiful moments of
Mm,
remembrance of him or being helped by dads in different moments and just feeling like his presence there and him like really had taking care of me while I was there. So it ended up being one of the best
that
burns, even if it was hard.
wow.
Yeah.
That's very special and incredible and happens to people who are open to it, I feel like. Yeah.
Yeah. Which was
Yeah.
another one of my
That's awesome.
intentions was to be open and inspired. So of course, when you ask that, it's like, here you go. Here's all the shit and here's all the great inspirations. I'm like, ah.
You're like, wait, no, can I like boundaries. That's my attention
I
scout.
should have put ease and grace. Damn it.
I fucked up. Oh man. Well, I'm happy to hear that you had a good one. It was definitely a really challenging year, just like all the elements wise, hardest one that I've ever been to. And so to hear that you like had a beautiful experience despite all of that, because it always is everything. Um, and it's always worth it. I
Yeah,
find
me too.
just this year for me where it wasn't, which was kind of wild and something I'm
Mm,
sitting with. Like the understanding that it's life, it's not always going to be, and like to be okay with that being
mhm,
like this year's burn, because it's always like the highs and the transformative experiences and the connections made and the things that you see that are like of another world
mhm,
always outweigh like hardships and the struggle. So for those of you listening, it's not a complete shit show like I've been making it out to be. Sob story.
It's like a
But yeah, I'm
psychedelic
excited.
experience. You know, it's like a
Mhm.
psychedelics. You
Yeah.
know, we can label psychedelic experience as bad, like a bad trip. You hear that a lot. I don't actually believe in bad trips. I believe that if you take that and you sit with it and extract what was present there, you probably gain some golden nuggets of wisdom.
Yes.
So, you know,
Yeah.
similar like life is psychedelic, truthfully. So if we look
Mhm.
at life in different perspectives, that's a psychedelic, and we forget
Yeah.
that.
Absolutely. Wow. That's a quote right there. Like, that's the quote for
Ding.
that month.
Hashtag.
What time was
Hashtag sex love yoga.
14. Perfect. Oh, man. Well, I would love to keep you all day, but I actually wanna meet you in person. So everyone in this interview, up for you all.
Bye,
Um
suckers.
Yes, that's it. No come down, no aftercare. No, I was gonna say, what's one thing that you really wish people, maybe that we haven't talked about yet, that you wish people knew about this work that are considering it?
About psychedelics or about
Yeah,
sex? Okay.
about having sex. Let's do both.
Sex and
What would you?
psychedelics. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, sex can be psychedelic. I mean, you know, I'm talking about life being psychedelic, sex can be psychedelic too. And also, psychedelics, again, are a tool. I think
mm,
there are so many complex concepts that are presented around sexuality or around relationships. You know, we hear things like surrender, or we hear things like self love, or we hear things like trust. What do those? But then those are beautiful on a meme, and they're beautiful to tell people and preach to people. You gotta self love, you know, and the self love's the answer to all this stuff. But how do you
yeah,
actually fucking do that? You know, or what does
yeah.
that actually mean? I remember, you know, going through my experiences, I had done ayahuasca, and ayahuasca is legal under, you know, established churches here in the United States. And I remember experiencing in ayahuasca this feeling of my whole body relaxing and letting go, and then realizing how contracted and tense and rigid I was in my body. And so to
Mm,
really experientially grasp that concept of surrender in my body gave me a new reference point of what it is that I was looking for. And then it was like,
mm,
oh, that's surrender. Okay. Now, how can we do that in this regular world? How can I call upon that sensation? What are the tools that I can use to keep me in that space of surrender?
mm,
um, Other experiences, boundaries between my body and the world. You know, I didn't realize how much I was dissociating or checking out, or like disassociating in sex. I thought I was in a dreamland and falling asleep in sex, so I had a lot of shame around that. I learned that that was dissociation. And so
Wow. Yeah.
psychedelics helped me to feel the groundedness in my body, or to feel, yeah, that difference between me inside interceptive awareness, and an external awareness, as well as the energy moving through my body. So that was, all of those were really helpful. And then I used the tools like, uh, you know, self-regulating tools, tantra tools. Um, I could call upon, energetic movement in sex and know what I was looking for. I'm like, oh, that's
Mm,
energy. Okay. I've felt that before. So now let me cultivate that some more. So it can be really helpful in accessing that.
yeah.
But again, as a tool. And then after you integrate, because we can't stay in that
Yeah.
state, non sober state forever. Then
Yeah.
it's
Not
almost like,
healthy.
yeah. And we're also outsourcing our own power versus learning how I can
Mm-hmm.
self source, use it as a reference,
Mm,
not as the thing. Yeah.
exactly. Mm-hmm. Amen. Aho, ashe to all that. Yes. It's so true though, because everything that a psychedelic is going to show you, you can create and you have access to
Hmm.
it with your own body and your own energy. And I think that is one of the most profound things that I've ever learned in this lifetime, truly, because they've shown me the most, I think, out of any other tool.
Hmm.
And I had that point, that click point of like, I can get there on my own. I can create that experience or that connection without it. That's when I really, that's when I feel like my spiritual path actually made sense to me. And
Yeah.
I actually part of spirit through that work
Yeah.
rather than it being this thing outside of me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or this concept that's being preached to you. Like, do some of these
Mm-hmm.
people who are preaching some of these things, do they actually know how to break that down for you so that you can access it? The concept of self love is another big one. Like, I deeply found what self love felt like in the mirror of a bathroom during an ayahuasca experience. I like
Yeah.
fell in love with my face, my eyes, my hair. I was like, oh my God, I'm so precious. And I was just like,
Yeah.
wow, it's so beautiful, right? And so now I know what that feels like, and I can do the work knowing what I'm looking
Mm-hmm.
for. But before that, I was like, what actually is self-love? Okay, it's me doing self-care. Okay, taking my stupid Epsom salt bath, drinking my stupid water, reading my stupid book, like lighting my stupid candles. Like, but that wasn't self-love. That was self-care. Those are two different things. But self-care can help, but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
But you can do self-care without self-love.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I can't wait to meet. Let's go get some coffee. Bad bitches. um, where can people find you? Are you taking new clients right now? Because every therapist that I know is not. And who
Yeah.
knows when this episode's coming.
Yeah, I'm not actually.
But
I'm doing.
okay.
Yeah, I'm
Tell us
doing.
how you're shutting.
Yeah. So I'm doing programs, online programs, and retreats. So you can work with me in person in retreats. I'm setting up multiple for 2023. So come check it out. Deep dive with me. My retreats are fucking
Yeah.
epic. Like they're legit.
Yes.
I to my own horn. But they can find me and they can sign up on my newsletter to find out when those workshops or when those retreats are. The otherwise, SexLoveYoga.com, Instagram, SexLoveYoga, my podcast, Sex Love Psychedelics. So it's just change of the last word. Yeah, find me on all those
Yeah.
places. Yeah.
Perfect. All of these things will be linked in the show notes. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been so rad.
My pleasure.
Okay, my loves, That has been another incredible episode. Definitely go connect with Dr. Kat. I am seriously thinking about going on one of her retreats. I didn't know she was doing that. So maybe we can go together. As always, please don't forget to rate and review the show. If you're not already subscribed, just take 10 seconds to do that. It means a lot to me when you do all of those things. And I will see you next week.